First of all, I want to say, Minister, that Fine Gael will be opposing this legislation. I know that doesn't cause you any surprise. No more than it causes any surprise that you actually would bring forward a very narrow piece of legislation at a time of serious economic and social problems in the country. That the zealousness by which you spoke today, the commitment that you have given in your speech today towards this agenda, is certainly one that surprises most people in the House. I know that, and we all know for a long time, that you have a solid commitment towards the removal of animal field sports throughout the country. You're on record of banning live cattle exports, and your party, you've been photographed on a number of occasions in protest marches and protests in relation to those issues. And when you suggest that this is not the thin end of the wedge in relation to many other field sports, I'm afraid your credibility is very low in that regard, because your actions in the past confirm to everybody that you won't fool anybody when you actually make a statement to the effect that this is not the thin end of the wedge and that you have another agenda that will continue into the future as long as you're Minister for the Environment. It's interesting that at the end of a very busy Dáil session, where €22 billion have been thrown down the Swanee effectively by the government in respect of bailing out Anglo-Irish Bank, that we're discussing the priorities of the Green Party, which is the Wildlife Amendment Bill and the Dog Breeding Establishment Bill, and a directly elected mayor of Dublin, which you've promised at the end of the year, which we know now, which you have failed to admit yet, will not happen this year, in spite of your perception, or seeking to give the perception that it will have. The commitment to ban stag hunting in the revised programme for government was never part of the original programme for government in 2007. Fianna Fáil party, which is the major party of the government, did not get a mandate from the people of this country to actually introduce this piece of legislation. And 6 members out of 166 now have decided that 154 years of countryside tradition in relation to the Ward Union hunt should be put aside. The worthless document that was a classic example of shameless spin in order to get over certain problems on the economy, produced in the revised programme for government in 2009, is now seen for what it is. That the majority of the membership of the Green Party at those conferences were more interested in the animal welfare issues, in being included in the revised programme for government, in dealing with dog breeding, in dealing with Wildlife Amendment Bill and animal welfare, than they were in the very serious issues of the National Asset Management Agency, the banking crisis, and indeed the fiscal and budgetary parameters for 2010. So in a cynical manoeuvre, you got your members on side, Minister, for the purpose of other very serious issues, because you were able to get some commitments from Fianna Fáil in writing about matters relating to animal welfare. And the soothing noises of Minister Dempsey at the time, one of the key Fianna Fáil negotiators, that all will be fine on the day, and that, you know, this won't happen in a hurry, and it mightn't even happen at all, he was suggesting to some of the backbenchers, have now been proven to be not, because of your zealousness and eagerness to ensure that you and your members were able to get this particular legislation before the House today. So the soothing noises of Minister Dempsey to the Fianna Fáil backbenchers is now seen for what it is, not worth the paper is written on. The commitment to ban stag hunting should be viewed in that light, as an ideological, political commitment that is very important to a small group of people, a very small group of people, but not important to the overall population, because they are concerned with issues relating to the banking inquiry and the bankers' report. They're interested in issues relating to jobs. They're interested in issues in relation to public expenditure matters for 2011. They're interested in the cover-up and investigations in the Dublin Docklands Development Authority. They're interested in slashing allowances for the blind, people with disabilities and children. They're interested in the removal of medical cards from the elderly. They're interested in the Green Party voting in the Dáil to support Willie O'D, Minister at the time, and Mr Eireann and Miss Harney, while we know that their heart wasn't in it, in order to ensure that their continued survival. They're interested in voting down all attempts for democratic consideration of 3 constituencies and by-elections, and they're overseeing a system of local government which is being strangled on a daily basis by you, Minister, in meeting the requirements in the remission in terms of various issues like water, wastewater, and matters relating to waste that ultimately will respond, and ultimately the response of this country will be the taxpayer picking up the tab in order to meet EU fines. These are the issues that are of interest to the people, rather than actually interesting discussions of an ideological and zealous nature of the ward union hunt. This is the record of the Green Party, and I think that the people are beginning to see through that at this stage. Now, my good friend Deputy Sergeant and I had a little chat about this particular matter on national radio this morning, and he actually introduced a new dimension to this particular matter, which was a big road safety issue. It's a big road safety issue, that deer crossing the road with a few dogs after them was going to be a huge issue in terms of unsafeness. And he couldn't give us any examples of where there had been fatalities, injuries, or any other matters. So the fear factor that was introduced by Deputy Sergeant in this matter is interesting, without any evidence whatsoever of any matters of injury or fatality. Just a scare tactic again, that in a liberal society, that we have people who get into their car to take risk, we have people who actually hunt animals or hunt animals for the purposes of commercial purposes across roadways, that so for some reason or other they're taking their lives in their hands, and that people that are coming around the bend in the road are going to run into those animals. He failed to tell the people of Ireland, of course, that this activity is happening under strict licensing conditions, monitoring, and where the Department of Agriculture and the Department of the Environment are supervising it on behalf of the state to make sure it's appropriate. Now, they can't do that everywhere when the cows are crossing the road. So, Minister, I think that we see that all the tenuous arguments that are trotted out in order to sustain an ideological argument is nothing more or less than ideology. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the particular practical implementation of these matters, but more to do with the zealousness by which you want to pursue a narrow political ideological agenda. The ward union hunt is the only licensed stag hunt in the Republic of Ireland hunting deer, and has a long history dating from the 19th century. And as we know, the hunting area comprises of North County Dublin with South and East Meath, and hunting takes place infrequently enough, 2 days a week in a particular time of the year from November to March. The ward union maintains its own herd of 150 Irish red deer. I'd be interested to know, Minister, if this legislation is approved, what are you going to do with those 150 red deer? What plans you have for those particular group of deer? They hunt stags, which are not generally killed, but are recaptured and returned to the herd. The ward union hunt has been required to apply for a licence annually since 1977 from the Department of the Environment. And each stag in the herd is hunted once a year and supervised, as I say, by Department of Environment wildlife officers and veterinary people. The health of the stag is checked before and after the hunt, and stress levels are recorded. Now, I think that that is a system that has worked well, a system that is fair, a system that takes account of animal welfare in a very serious way, and a system that nobody seems to have had a problem with until you came along, Minister, and decided to think otherwise. The ward union hunt has 200 members and contributes 1.4 million annually to the economy, and research which has been carried out by UCG will certainly point out the enormous contribution that field sports, rural pursuits play to the Irish economy. And I know there's an anti-rural bias in relation to your agenda, Minister. And you have displayed that yourself in protest marches that you have been at over the years. So you have plenty of photographs to show that. Plenty of it. So we know where you're coming from. We know where you're from. No, you actually like getting publicity yourself. You're very interested in getting your name and you're getting your name and photograph in the paper, Minister. And so therefore there's plenty of evidence to suggest what your narrow political pursuit is on these matters. But we believe in Fine Gael that hunting plays an important cultural and economic role in rural Ireland, a very important cultural and economic role, and something the Green Party, of course, I wouldn't expect them to appreciate or understand. With the Green Party in government, there is no guarantee that this ban doesn't represent the thin end of the wedge, with more country pursuits banned in the following months and years. And in addition, as I said earlier, the Green Party in opposition and as part of their election manifesto are on record to stop live animal exports. I'm sure that Mr. Deputy Sergeant would be very familiar with that. Very familiar with that.
Sorry,
Fine Gael will stand up for, in my view, our country heritage as well as our urban heritage, the rural economy as well as our urban economy, the rural life as well as the urban life. And one size does not fit all, Minister, whereby you are not always right, where you try to portray that I know best attitude won't normally work, everywhere in this country. So if you want to pursue a narrow political agenda, with your partners in government acquiescing to this particular agenda, that is your business. But don't denigrate anybody else on this side of the House, or indeed on your own side of the House, that has a different view. We will not be lectured by you, Minister, who has no understanding of the pressures and traditions of those living in rural Ireland, who at this stage are sick and tired of being targeted by this Green Party minister in government, who turns his nose up at their way of life at every opportunity. I am surprised, though, that this legislation has found agreement with the Fianna Fáil deputies. Not one of the Fianna Fáil parliamentary party spoke out against the approval of the revised programme for government, which included a commitment to ban stag hunting and to ban the ward union hunt. So why should any Fianna Fáil deputy be surprised that this legislation is being debated here this evening, when they could have opposed it as far back as November 2009? So I would hope that the representations that those individual deputies have been getting from people, and the commitments that they have been giving to people, that we'll see evidence of that when it comes to voting on this legislation. And there's no point in having soothing noises afterwards. This is the hour, this is the opportunity for people to say to Minister Gormley, enough is enough. We do not want to introduce this legislation that will ban a countryside tradition and a countryside organisation that has been there since 1854, who has been monitored, supervised and licensed by this state to ensure that they carry out their duties responsibly and well. And I hope that the reflection of all deputies in the House on this legislation and the narrow ideological agenda that it's seeking to pursue will be seen for what it is, and that the House will reject this legislation at second stage.